Welcome back, everybody, to another Pickled Dragon Unscripted. Matt, Pickled Dragon. Here with Dracoya, the ever talented. And we have a very special show for you today. We recently reviewed a adventure by Rob Kuntz, and the publisher of that adventure um, a couple of years ago or a year ago, I think it was a couple of years ago. Yes, a couple of years ago, made a video, a documentary on the history of Dungeons and Dragons. It's called The Secrets of Blackmoor. So Jacoya and I sat down, we took a look at it, and we wanted to give you our thoughts on it. And hopefully uh impart some information on you and maybe inspire you to watch the video because it's pretty good, but we'll get there. We'll get there. What do you think, Jaya?
That sounds like an excellent plan.
Yes. Yes. So, yeah, so before we start, we are just going to play the trailer for Secrets of Blackmoor so you kind of get a gist of what we're up to here. So let me bring that up for you. And here we go, ladies and gentlemen.
I just killed Ernest.
And the consequences are that Jim Clark ran his sword right through Anderson's heart and killed him dead or in a doornail.
Doubt leads to fear, and fear, if properly manipulated, leads to terror.
Role-playing games first began in 1971. Don't ask me why I know that, because I'm the one who did it. Thank you very much.
I don't think it was his plan as a kid to become some entrepreneurial game designer.
Just kind of evolved is the best word I can think of.
You got a castle in the middle, there's tunnels. What do you want to do? And that magical, what do you want to do? That's a turning point in my mind. What do you want to do?
It was so much make-believe. That was the best part.
A zero-sum game, you win or you lose. A non-zero-sum game, more than one person can win.
When the bell rung, scattered the party.
You didn't do any of these things.
It was all in my head.
We had guys that volunteered to hold the door.
He was describing it, and he was incredible.
We had one dragon.
Well, I was just the first dwarf.
Because I was just the wandering elf.
The Wizard of the Wood.
Yes, I am the high priest of the Temple of the Frogs.
Oh, the vampire rosebush. That was Dwayne.
I bought a house. I was the first thief.
I was the sole survivor of the first dungeon adventure.
I think he was very proud of his Blackmoor.
I think that's it. So obviously, I've said many times on this channel that I am, I am a person who loves the legacy of the game. I am a history fanatic, and so when I saw this, I'm like, yes, this is right up my alley. This is pretty cool. And you know, I have to admit, it is kind of like almost like sacred ground to me that you're stepping on, especially with, there's obviously been all the attacks on the old timers and stuff over the years, and you just got to roll your eyes because they were all walking on this new ground, you know. But before I ramble on, I'm going to ramble like never rambled before. So I'm going to let Dracoya talk for a minute before I just go crazy.
It was a really good documentary. I actually really enjoyed the beginning part. And I know, Matt, we kind of disagreed on this a little bit. But in the beginning, they talk about the history of role-playing and strategy games, tabletop in general. And they don't even mention Dungeons and Dragons until much, much later in the documentary. And I really enjoyed seeing this evolution of tabletop history. And as a miniature painter, I also really enjoyed the discussions that they threw in there about miniatures. And they had all these different pictures of old miniatures from like back in the day. I really enjoyed this documentary. It was a great time.
Well, I think we agreed, like you and I agreed, you and I agreed that the all of the stuff, because the documentary starts out with wargaming, the Napoleonic stuff that you guys hear so much about. And the documentary spends a lot of time in that era. And I think to get a complete picture of the history of Dungeons and Dragons, you really do need to spend a lot of time there.
I
Um,
agree.
but when you look at some of the reviews that are out for this documentary, there were a lot of people who are like, "That this isn't what I expected." I
It's
think
not.
if you look at the trailer, it was like really focused on the fantasy RPG side, and that's really only the last 30 minutes of the 2 hour documentary. Um, and so you get, it starts out with the Napoleonics and um, how there were no real rules written down until somebody in a library found these texts from 1870s or whatever on
The Strategos book, I believe
yeah,
it.
the Strategos books. Yes.
Yeah.
And those from those books they were beginning to extrapolate the rules and how, like, depending on whose house you were playing at, those were the house rules that were in place. No, there was no arguing. And
Because it's whoever's house, that's the person who gets to establish these rules. But I
yeah.
mean, that's what I really liked about it, Matt. I loved the Napoleonic era and how they were talking about this small evolution throughout. And maybe there wasn't enough emphasis on these steps. It was very subtle, but all these steps needed to occur. All these people had to meet and go over a game for the Napoleonic era. And then it was little things, like one thing that was mentioned for miniatures is that over time they would mutilate their miniatures based on what happened in the game, which I thought was super clever. So you'd have miniatures with like a peg leg or a missing arm. Like, oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, all the lead miniatures, they were probably pretty easy to take apart and remold, but you know one of the things I took away from this video, because it kept coming up, um, whether they were talking about the Napoleonics or the earliest role-playing experiences with the Bronsteins or Steins. They pronounced it differently, the Bronsteins, which were kind of Napoleonic war, but everyone took the role of a character, a general, a civilian, a spy, and that was actually Dave Wesley, which is funny because in the documentary, in the trailer we just saw, we see Dave Arneson family famously saying, "I did it in 1971." Well, fantasy role playing, yeah, but even Dave Arneson credited Dave Wesley with doing the Napoleonic Bronstein, the the first role playing game, if you will, where people were taking on individual roles rather than entire armies into their games, and that stuff I found really cool. Um, but the theme of no rules just kept coming up over and over again. And I kept thinking about that Gary Gygax quote, the secret we need to keep from all DMs is that they don't need our rules, because like they made this stuff up as they went, and it was really cool to hear all these people impart their experiences and all of, and even they were talking about uh in the Bronsteins, Dave Arneson challenged this guy to a duel, and there were no rules for a duel, so the guy running Dave Wesley just had to make it up, and Dave Arneson got a sword through the chest, and died. uh
Mm-hmm.
so it's a very cool experience. Now, my one critique and I think, you know, Gary Gygax gets um, criticized for a lot of, kind of worship. There's like all these people that just like worship the ground he walked on, and he was a human with human frailties and whatnot. And so we all know that as much as we appreciate him putting the rules together, because Arneson may have came up with the idea, Gary
But Jim
Gygax.
kind of tied a ribbon on it. He
Yeah.
put all the little pieces together. Well, and that was what was so fascinating to me watching this documentary. Obviously, seeing how much tabletop or D&D specifically has come such a long way from at this point. And yet how much has completely stayed the exact same. They went over and over again about all the different arguments that they would have, and somebody's dad would come down to their basement and be like, "Why are you guys yelling at each other?" Like, and this is a weekly thing where people would get into these knockdown, drag out fights over the rules and semantics, and I'm like, well, geez, I don't know about you guys, but yeah, that still sounds right.
And that is fascinating because, we still get into these arguments about the rules, but imagine arguing about the rules when there were no written rules.
Right?
That is crazy to me.
I've gotten into an
Crazy
argument with
cool.
my DM about one particular sentence, whether or not it had a comma, and if it didn't have a comma, and my argument was because it did not have a comma, the the idea of this one sentence is completely changed, and therefore,
Yeah. But getting back to, the kind of the hero worship of Gary Gygax, this video or this documentary, there's definitely kind of a hero worship of
yeah.
Dave Arneson. And we're actually going to do a separate video on that because there are other folks out there that said that Dave Arneson could be quite difficult when he wanted to be. And that
But
didn't
people
make
have
the documentary. That did not make it into the documentary.
no, it didn't. There was definitely a lot of pro Arneson, but I will say people have said similar things about Gygax, and in our findings, a lot of the crap that people are spreading about Gygax was just that crap.
Yeah, the one critique about Gygax I've heard that is probably valid, it was that there were at TSR's height when they were really scrambling in the early 80s and making some money, and he was out in Hollywood, there was like a corporate Gygax and then there was like Gary Gygax. And the corporate Gygax was just like, all business, and he would ghost people, gamers who would flock to him. And so it's like it's we all have different sides, and I think with Dave Arneson, there's definitely a different side, and we've got some stories to share. We're going to do that in another video, though. But some of my favorite things were just seeing, this guy right here, Greg Svensson, and his character was the Great Svenny, and him talking about creating his own keep and having to hire all these hirelings. And the reason I bring this up is because we had the stronghold videos in the past, and we're kind of like the Bastion. New Bastion system was just like a safe place for players. Well, the Great Svenny founded the first player keep, and of course Dave Arneson had it raided and sacked by bandits and brigands, and the
Yeah.
Great Svenny had to get revenge. So I love that. There was a guy named Ross Baker. He was the very first dwarf player. Cool stuff.
They
There
also
was,
emphasized a lot of some of the first female players, which
yes,
I
the very first female player, Gail, what was her name? Gaylord, and her husband, with a Wizard of the Wood, was Peter Gaylord. He was the very first person to ever play a wizard. Cool stuff to me. Cool stuff, Um, but I definitely recommend this documentary. And part of the reason I really would like to see everyone share our video and to really push this video is because for whatever reason, the documentary didn't take off as well as the creators had hoped. And this was supposed to be part one of volume one. I've got it right here, guys.
No, I'm
Volume
so
one.
upset about this because right after we finished this video, I told Matt, I'm like, when's part two coming out? I loved this documentary that much. You can criticize, you can say, some parts didn't like this or didn't like
Yeah.
that, and that's fine. Maybe not every single minute is going to be for everybody. I loved it. And I really did enjoy the Napoleonic era in the beginning, because for me, the number one thing I love about tabletop is the strategy. I like the turn-based strategy. I enjoy playing things like chess, and so watching that evolution of something that I love so much was so great. I love this documentary. So guys, please share. Please
Yeah, and
like, comment, subscribe, and share this video.
yeah, because we definitely would love to see a part two. And I think the part two is where all that meat on the bones that I think the average gamer wants to see. You know, like that last half hour of the video when they focused in on Blackmoor and the fantasy RPG, and it was kind of like the teaser to what was coming in volume two. Um, I could see where somebody who was only interested in the fantasy aspect isn't really interested in Bronsteins or Bronsteins and all of that history. But if what we're talking about is the subtitle is a true history of Dungeons and Dragons, you've really got to delve that stuff if you want to go down there. So yeah, share this video. We need volume two. You could go out to the Secrets
Oh,
of
you
Blackmore.
too.
Yes, you could go out to the Secrets of Blackmore guys and be like, we need it. It needs to
Yeah.
happen. So yeah,
We'll give you guys links down below, so feel free to tag them and share as much as your heart's content. But we
yes,
really recommend this documentary. I especially do. I had a fantastic time learning more about the history of D&D. In fact, I was having a conversation with somebody the other day who asked me where D&D came from, and now I sound so smart.
yes. I know this guy named Dave Arnes. Yeah. All right, guys. You want to take us out, Dracoya?
All right, guys. Comment, like, subscribe. If there's any more information that you want, click the links down below. And as always, come back and have another round on us.
Woohoo!